Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to go ahead and check out some more Jurassic World Dominion figures. Not only some more Jurassic World Dominion figures, but we actually have more from the Takara Tomy brand. I recently had taken a look at 4 figures that were kind of like Takara Tomy Jurassic World Dominion. I think you call them Gashapon figures. I'm not entirely sure if I pronounced that correctly. We now have a few more as we are taking a look at the Raptors from that series. We've got all of the Raptors besides Beta that I can recall we see in Jurassic World Dominion, as we have the Pyroraptor, Velociraptor Blue, and the entire Atrociraptor squad. You can see that 2 of them are kind of hanging out way back there in the back because they do not want to stand. I have been trying everything to get those to balance out. For some reason, the legs are warped and they will not stand. I'll have to do the hot water, cold water trick on those to get them to stand at some point in the near future. But as of right now, no dice when it comes to those guys. But again, we've got quite a few figures here to get through, so let's jump to that closer look right now. So we'll begin with one of the 2 figures that choose not to stand, and it also apparently doesn't want to focus. What a troublemaker Atrociraptor Ghost is today. But you can see, again, they are very similar to the previous Dominion figures that I had taken a look at of this type, where they kind of just have a different look compared to what they look like in the actual film, and a different look compared to the previously released versions of the Atrociraptors, because we have the mainline versions that are already out from Takara Tomy, which I think those ones look a lot better. The coloration and paint schemes of these ones I think look better than the mainline versions because they're actually a lot closer to what you see on screen, but the sculpts just look off to me. Like the head sculpt, it looks okay, but for some reason it just looks, I don't know, a little bit weird to me. It just doesn't look how they look in the film, if you ask me. But it looks okay as far as the fine detail goes. You know, you've got some nice paintwork because you have that light tone that Atrociraptor Ghost is pretty much known for. You also have the grayish tones kind of designing down. Not exactly how you see them designed through the course of the film, because there's just a little bit more to Atrociraptor Ghost as far as that coloration goes. But you can also see we have a red eye with a black slit-like pupil, again capturing the color. Overall, fairly okay for the most part. You also have gray for the nails, which is nice to see painted nails. And, you know, the sculpt and detail looks pretty decent overall. The texturing, I think, might be a little bit different compared to the way it looks actually on the Atrociraptors in the film. But it does still have a pretty highly detailed appearance, and you can see that even on the underside. Again, the actual sculpt and detail is alright. You know, it doesn't look terrible. You know, overall, you can see the sculpting and everything here in the stomach and leading up into the throat, and then we lose you know, the ability to see it because we lose focus. It's another one of those instances where the figures have to be kind of pressed together. This leg will not go in all the way, and it's absolutely being a pain. I don't think that's part of the reason why it's not standing, because the leg that's actually causing the problem is this leg. It's this rock and everything. For some reason, it's just leaning and falling over. You can see it's kind of slanted, so it doesn't want to stand very well. But again, the overall likeness, I think, is close, but still has just something a little bit off about it. I'm not sure what it is. I do like the pose and everything of the Atrociraptor, though, with the arms held open and everything. Definitely really nice as far as that goes, but there's just something, I think, about the head sculpt that's quite off. We do have paint work on the inside of the mouth and everything, though. You can see there's a nice lighter tone there for the tongue. The teeth are kind of okay as far as the paint work goes. It's a little hard to see how jumbled that paintwork might be in there. It looks a little bit thick. If we could focus on it a little better. It looks a little bit thick. The teeth themselves aren't really sculpted that nicely. They're all kind of jumbled together and just look like a sloppy kind of plasticky mess. But again, they're not great. They're not, I think, as good as the mainline versions, but they're also not terrible. One thing, though, that is kind of a downside for the Atrociraptors, though, is the fact that each and every single one is the same sculpt. And there's no difference between them as far as the sculpts go. Every single one is positioned the same way, with the legs forward, and, you know, the arms held out, the mouth open, the tilt and turn in the head, and the tail curved the way it is. So detail-wise, we really don't need to go over them. We have to just take a look at the coloration. This one obviously here would be Atrociraptor Tiger, because we have that almost Lost World Jurassic Park Velociraptor kind of color scheme with the orangish tones and then the striping moving along the course of the back. It is nice to see, you know, a decent amount of paintwork for this one, because we have color running all the way out onto the tail, starting up there in the top of the neck, and you can see again the eye is painted with kind of a yellowish tone and a black pupil. You can see that over here. The eyes look okay, you know, not terrible. We also have some slight, almost like a brownish wash sort of showing up there on the face, just to add a little extra color variation. On top of that, we have a light tone for the lower jaw that runs down through the course of the underside. You can see that light tone also overtakes the arms and lower part of the legs. For the most part, we have gray for the nails on this version as well. The light tone does end, though, before we reach out into the tail. Again, we've got the rock here, same deal as far as the way that it helps them to stand, and that's exactly what the other Dominion figures like this that I had taken a look at had going on with the rock and everything holding them up. But this one looks okay. I would say this one looks a little bit better than Atrociraptor Ghost. Not that Ghost looked terrible, but this one I think is a little bit nicer. Then we've got Panthera, and Panthera probably has the most lackluster paint of all of them. They really didn't do a great job of capturing the likeness as far as the coloration goes. Yet again, like I said, same sculpt exactly, but the coloration of this one is kind of like a light orangish tone, and then you've got some brown tones showing up there in the face, also here on the top of the head, running down the course of the neck, and then you also have a little more there on the arm, and a little bit here kind of on the underside of the raptor. But that's really about it outside of this light tone that shows up in the throat and runs along the underside, and then the painted nails. So there's not a whole lot going on as far as the coloration of this one compared to the others. You know, it doesn't look bad again, but it's just not perfectly recreating the coloration and color scheme of Atrociraptor Panthera. I feel like the others were closer to what they actually look like on screen. There's definitely a little bit of a different design, a little bit of a different coloration for the, you know, Atrociraptor Panthera in the film, but again, it looks okay. And then we also have Atrociraptor Red, and I think Atrociraptor Red actually looks pretty cool. Again, they got the general idea of what the raptor looks like, and they've given it that kind of light striping there moving along the tail. They are a little inconsistent, you can see, as far as the placement of those stripes. They look a little bit off, but we basically have like this reddish brown tone for the majority of the body, that striping moving down the tail, and then a little bit of light coloration running along the underside, starting in the throat, and again ending before we reach the tail. So they don't really like to include that lighter tone toward the tail, it seems. Again, the nails are painted and everything, like we had seen on all of the other figures, and you can see that lighter tone leading up into the stomach right there. It is nice to see the Atrociraptor squad colored somewhat correctly. You know, a lot of the figures we've had of these raptors have really been off as far as the coloration goes compared to what you see on screen. It kind of reminds me of Hasbro when they had the Jurassic World license and they were trying to recreate the Velociraptor squad, where the colors were just so weird and just off and not even remotely close to what you see on screen. That's been a pretty consistent trend with the Atrociraptors from Dominion, but this version of them, these four for the again, Gashapon, I believe they're called, or something along those lines, from Takara Tomy, have definitely been a lot closer than I've seen for most versions of these Atrociraptors. But same sculpt again, just different paint, which I think somewhat okay resembles Atrociraptor Red. We've also got Velociraptor Beta here. And initially, I actually thought this was Velociraptor Blue. There isn't anything that comes with it that actually says who we are looking at. But the one thing that gave it away to me just now is the smaller claw on the foot. And I don't really know that I would say that looks like Velociraptor Beta. I think it looks more like a goofy version of an adult Velociraptor Blue, but not so much a baby version of, you know, of course, Blue is basically looking exactly the same as Beta, so I think it looks a little bit off as far as the appearance to Velociraptor Beta, but definitely still cool that they did at least capture that one little addition there, that kind of smaller claw that Velociraptor Beta has. But again, I think it looks okay for what it is. You know, not really great. The teeth are big and bulky. They're all kind of combined there together. They don't really stand out, so they look pretty goofy. The actual head sculpt looks a bit off. The paint is okay for what it is. You can see the eye placement is really nice, but the blue stripe looks a little generic, a little bit more so like paint on a figure rather than body color. We do have some okay looking detailing as we move down the course of the neck with some creases and stuff, and you have some fairly nice looking sculpt and detail through the course of the body. You've got the spinal column there on the top. You can see the rib cage there kind of showing on the side. Nice muscle definition and everything throughout. You've got some nice scoots down the fingers. We do have a lighter gray for the nails, so the nails kind of, you know, when you look at them, they almost appear unpainted, but they are actually painted. They do have a light gray there for the nails. Same deal, of course, for the feet, and that includes the dew claw. We do have the dew claw painted. I think the raptor looks a little bit thicker, just oddly thick, kind of the way that a lot of them look, more so than what Beta actually looks like in the film. I do like the pose on this one. I do like that kind of running pose with the leg trailing and everything. And of course we have the rock there, which is kind of like the key to holding all of these figures up. But you can again see it looks a little iffy over here. I think that the hand looks goofy over here because the fingers are so closed. I think with the arms kind of the way that they are, the fingers should have been opened up and everything just to make it a little bit cooler. Kind of like the way we have it over here. Looks a little bit off over here. But again, it's okay for what it is. It's definitely not going to win any awards, that's for sure. But it's not a terrible figure when it comes to a beta, and it is always fun to have another Velociraptor beta included in any Jurassic line because he doesn't really have all that many figures, so it's pretty cool to have another one, even if it doesn't really look exactly like beta. But my favorite of the bunch is definitely the Pyroraptor. I think the Pyroraptor looks awesome. They almost all have the same sort of like charging in kind of a little bit crouched, kind of like open mouth, angry look. It seems to be like the way to go when it comes to raptors, but this is kind of the way that the Pyroraptor appears in the scene that it actually does show up in Dominion, where it's kind of running down that little walkway and it has this sort of visual to it. So that's pretty cool. You can again see it looks really nice. We've got some very nice plumage on the arms, which is very cool to see, especially after the Mattel versions kind of excluded that, so it looks a lot more screen accurate. And even though the head kind of gets a little obscured there by the hands, you can see the head sculpt looks a lot nicer. Kind of looks like the eye placement is off though. Yeah, it definitely is. So the eye placement on that side isn't perfect. Definitely better over here, so this is the stronger side when it comes to a display, but I think the head sculpt actually looks pretty good, much closer to the head sculpt of what the Pyroraptor looks like than any of the head sculpts had appeared on the other figures, as opposed to looking at, like, you know, what they look like in the film. So I think they did a good job as far as the Pyroraptor goes, and we have some nice coloration throughout with the reds, and then you've got some lighter tones running along the outer edge of the feathers there, and of course the skin textured areas have the darker tones, which look nice. You can see that the nails are sculpted really nicely, but actually I just discovered one thing that is a downside, and if it's on the figure, I definitely didn't see it, or I shouldn't say the figure. If it's on the dinosaur in the film, we have Beta's foot for some reason. So it looks like maybe Beta and the Pyroraptor kind of have the same foot, minus the fact that we have feathers sculpted on this one. So let's actually grab Beta really quickly. Well, see, that's very strange because the positioning of the leg is different there. But if you look over here, you can see the foot sculpt looks very similar, but still a little bit different, which is very confusing. But they still gave it that smaller claw that you see associated with Beta. And I don't remember that being on the Pyroraptor in the film, unless I missed it, but I really don't see the designers of the dinosaurs in the film giving two different dinosaurs that kind of smaller claw. That doesn't really make sense. Very interesting, I just noticed that. But you can see the feathers of the tail actually look really, really cool. You can see they're just kind of wavy all over the place. We also have that lighter tone as far as the feathers go, running along the outer edge and out into the plumage there of the tail feathers. But it does look really cool. Again, definitely some really nice paintwork for this one. Really nice sculpt and detail. Like, the feathers are actually really well done when it comes to a sculpting standpoint. And I actually think this is much nicer than the Pyroraptor we got in the main line of the Takara Tomy Jurassic World Dominion figures. And that's saying something, because out of all of these kind of Gashapon style figures, this is the only one that I think looks better than the actual figure that we got in the mainline version of these Takara Tomy figures. And this is easily the best one of all of these Takara Tomy Gashapon figures. It's unfortunate that mine has a little bit of a wonky eye, but still a really, really cool version of the Pyroraptor. Now, as far as the size goes, you can see they are all a very similar size. They're, you know, just different positions going on, like some of the heads are up higher, some of the heads are down lower. All of the tails seem to be pretty high. But for a size on, let's go with the Atrociraptor, you're looking at about 4.5 inches or around 11.5 centimeters. For the Pyroraptor, about 4.5 inches or 11.5 centimeters. And for Velociraptor Blue, or I mean Beta, not Blue, I'm sorry, 4.25 inches or 11 centimeters. So they're very similar in size, and for a height, the highest one is definitely Beta, about 2.75 inches or right around 7 centimeters. For a size comparison, There is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line for a comparison next to our Takara Tomy Raptors. And you can see we only have 3 of them in, and that's because the Atrociraptor is the same sculpt on the other 3, so we didn't really need to bring them all in. But this definitely shows you that even though they are on the smaller side, I feel like they're fairly decent for being Takara Tomy figures as far as the size goes. Probably around the same size or a little bit larger than the actual mainline versions. The Pyroraptor is definitely larger, as the Pyroraptor from the mainline was actually pretty small. But you can see that they are a decent size. Unfortunately, they don't sport any articulation at all, which is something that the mainline figures do have, but this is a nice alternative at the same time to the mainline figures that have those kind of ball joints in the tails that a lot of people don't like. Then you can get these type of figures without them. And now here you can see a comparison with the Gashapon style figures next to their mainline variants. And I will say the sizes are all over the place here, because the Atrociraptors are actually quite a bit larger than these figures are. The Pyroraptor is way smaller, and Velociraptor Beta is way smaller. So that's very interesting how they just differ so much in size. But if we actually bring Beta out and bring Blue in, you can see that Blue isn't going to want to stand right now. But Blue is kind of a similar size to the Beta here in this line, so they're not too far off if you happen to have the Velociraptor Blue figure. Then for another comparison, we have a super-sized Captives, a normal-sized Captives, and a Mattel minifigure here standing in to show you roughly what the size is next to these figures. So you can see that they do all have minifigure size ranges to them. They're not very large, but they're not super tiny. You know, they're not quite as small as you see with the Mattel minis or the regular standard size Captives, but still by no means are they large figures. And then for one final comparison, we have a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus standing in here to give us an idea of the fact that these are, again, still quite small. Definitely by no means are these large figures, so you should probably have an idea of the size at this point, and obviously showing you that they are fairly decent kind of sized minifigures. So these really interesting Jurassic World Dominion Raptor figures from Takara Tomy for their Gashapon line are kind of cool. You know, they're definitely not the greatest thing in the world, and I feel like the sculpts are still off a little bit on all of them except for the Pyroraptor, but they are kind of fun at the same time. They definitely did a very good job as far as sculpting them out with fine detail, especially the Pyroraptor. It is absolutely overloaded with gorgeous detail. But the sculpts are a little off on some, much better on others. The paint jobs as well are pretty decent for the most part. I think the worst paint job would be Beta. I just don't really like the coloration on Beta all that much. I think it looks, you know, kind of reminiscent to the film, not quite the same tone of gray, and the blue stripe just absolutely looks more so like paint on a figure rather than body color. But I don't expect perfection when it comes to this stuff. It's just that, you know, as far as all of these figures go, I would say that one has the worst paint, but even still, it's pretty much the type of paint that I would have expected. The Pyroraptor is absolutely awesome. The sculpt looks great. The paint looks really nice for the most part, especially when it comes to a figure like this. Of course, we do have proportions that are off, like the hands look too big, the feet look too big, stuff like that, but it still is a pretty cool version of the Pyroraptor. And then the Atrociraptors, you know, even though they look a little off as far as their appearance goes, I think they're probably some of the best Atrociraptors that we've had as far as coloration goes from companies that create figures like this, because for the most part they did capture the likeness of them, you know, in a decent way. And even though they're not super highly detailed as far as the paintwork goes, again, I wouldn't expect that for these type of figures, they are fairly decent, and they do create a pretty cool visual when they're all combined and, you know, displayed together. But as a whole, they're definitely not the greatest thing in the world. They're not something that I absolutely say you need to go find, but they're not the worst thing in the world either. I do want to give a huge shout out and a thank you to my good friend Dino Mike Mac, who was kind enough to help me acquire these, because they're very hard to find here in the United States. Even if you try searching on eBay, like, you really just have a hard time finding them anywhere. So luckily I had him step in, and he was able to help me acquire them, like he often does. So a huge thank you goes out to him. So if you would like to find some of these for yourself, you know, the best bet would just be search around on eBay. I can't say for sure that you'll find them, because again, they're a little bit of a pain in the butt to find. But if you can find them, you know, they're worth picking up if they're fairly cheap, because they're kind of fun. Again, let me know in the comments section what you guys think of these, and also like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.